not been fed back on the previous feedback forms, that might be helpful.
Definitely, and the maybe it's absolutely fine from my end recording, and I've got to get back to the other meeting that I'm on at 2:30, but very happy. And Sharon Kelly in my team can collate bits of feedback. So yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you.
I just realised my typing's probably going backwards.
So I understand Dr. Joy Sood will be late for a couple of minutes. So shall we start in the meantime, and she will join in 5 minutes, I think. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the peer support session. So I assume everyone here knows who I am, but just in case, I'm Serhat Özçelik, and I am part of the Central PMO working towards this program with Sarah Buckley, who is also on this call. And as you know, today's agenda is, all about issues on the finances and payments mostly. And we have our NHSE colleagues here with us today. So Dr. Rachel Roberts, who is the Primary Care Dean London and Clinical Director of Primary Care and Workforce. And also we have Jonathan Sampson, who is the Senior Program Manager Transforming Primary Care. So for the initial part, I would like to hand over to Dr. Rachel Roberts now. She kindly wanted to talk about the delays in relation to PG third payments and also seek views and thoughts about the career transition to help form plans for the next year. And then afterwards, we will look into where we are at in terms of the other payments issues, etc. So would that be okay if I hand it over to Dr. Roberts? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the invitation, and sorry that I wasn't able to come last time. And obviously I'm here alongside Jonathan, and that's absolutely fantastic. And thanks, Jonathan, for the support for the session last time. So I'm a GP. I've started off as a GP program director in Ilford in 1998, obviously a long time ago, and have genuinely continued through the educational route. And I think, so first of all, I feel very sad and upset that you've been through really difficult times, and that in a sense, for me, one of the things right back to 2017 and thinking about creating opportunities post qualification was really about the stories I was hearing from people who had just finished a GP training, who maybe felt not quite the same support post training, and what would be a really good career opportunity going forward. How do you open up opportunities both within practices where you feel welcome, also in career development in a portfolio, and through peer support and having program directors? And so right back to that time, 2017, and particularly in Barking, Havering, Dagenham and Redbridge, where that perception was particularly acute, was the source of creating this, and the hope was to give a really positive career support structure. And I guess London's the only one where we've managed to negotiate, say, funded program directors for SPIN, etc., like Munir's role, and then more recently managers. So I guess it's a great deal of personal distress to me that you've all been through a difficult time. So I'm extremely sorry about that. So my main remit today is to talk about the funding streams that come directly through what's been HEE, or Workforce Training Education Directorate. So for this, it's those postgraduate certificate payments. That's in direct remit, but I work alongside Jonathan in the NHSE other regional team. So the monies that flow from national through ICBs to training hubs are going to be talked about elsewhere, but Jonathan and myself have flagged it through to Fiona and other than the ICB and the training hubs. And yeah, so basically, because I suppose this is really important and really matters to all of us, that there are positive career options after training. I know this may not be a good time to ask the question, but I still want to ask the question of what do you actually think of this sort of opportunity? Is it still worth continuing with in ongoing years? Because that's a really important thing, and I just want to ask that, if that's okay. So can I just see, Castir, is that okay if we cover those two areas just now? Yeah, and obviously happy to answer any questions at all. I sent some slides through about an after action review just on the postgraduate certificate payments. Do people want me to, do people want those screens shared, or have you had a look at them before?
So I'm going to speak on behalf of, I think, all of us, but please do share them in case people haven't seen them or haven't had a chance. But with regards to your initial question, I would like to know what the attendees here, or the fellows, do feel, because personally, I think, as you've said, it's formalised a process that was going on in the background. So the Spin Fellowship, the London Spin Fellowship in particular, it's formalised a process that there's people that you know are in the job role to support you, that can specifically carve out that pathway, and that there's funding attached.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is an official process is a huge benefit. I think that's been probably fed back on a lot of the feedback, and
Yes.
I can see Sarah's here today as well, and maybe she can share some of the feedback that she gets on the feedback forms. That's a huge bonus, and the fact in North East London, I feel that we are quite privileged due to the options. There's a huge options compared to other areas, but the downside is that funding, and it's such a big part that it can make or break such a beneficial program. But I will ask other fellows to also share their experience, because obviously there's varying experiences in here, varying programs.
Thank you, really, really helpful. Okay, I'll just briefly, I'll just screen share this. Hope is that coming up for you?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the after action review just about the postgraduate certificate payments, because that's the only bit under direct control of the team that I'm in. So those that are on the PG Cert with Canterbury Christ Church University. So Louise Saul and the team helped me to collate this. So what I should say is that this was entirely the effect of the legal merger between what was Health Education England and NHS England into now the single organisation, and HE is now the Workforce Training and Education Directorate of NHS England, and that legal merger started in April this year. What it appears was not anticipated about a broad range of payments, but I think primary care overrepresented in this is that the new organisation had very strong, well, set processes, should I say, for approving any payments, particularly anything that's over £10,000, and probably did not have an understanding, particularly in terms of primary care organisations, how that should flow, and the fact that this had all been fully worked through, that Training Hubs had a full procured contract, and therefore was a completely legal route to transfer money, etc. So there wasn't, as the legal merger happened nationally, a clear understanding that would allow pathways of funding to go, and that was not something that had been flagged as an earlier risk. So basically, these slides show what should have happened and then what actually happened. And of course, this is only a one-off legal merger, so this is not expected to happen again. So before the merger, you'd get these two tranches of money at different points in the year. The second bit says how the money would flow, and that usually prior to the merger, this would take about 2 weeks for the money to come through. What this after action review shows what should have happened, and obviously some of this is detail, and I don't personally do the finance POs and things, so if there are definite finance questions, I may not be the best one to answer that, but this is how the funding flow should have happened and has always happened every other year. So we've had PG Cert actually since before 2017. We've had it since about 2014, initially through the West Midlands and then Canterbury Christ Church. So this is the first year that there's been a block that's happened that's been flagged to us. And then what actually happened was that we were told post-April, about 2 to 3 months later, that any request for money had to have a business case if it was more than £10,000, and had to go to a very small number of people in the national NHS England team to sign off. And again, that none of that is actually correct. All of the various contracts were in place. So that's all been worked through. But there were daily, very, very many emails, meetings and calls over several months to open that up. So this just details how those things have been logged. So we still maintain a log of every email that had to go off, every meeting that had to go off. And this was escalated straight away to the London Region Senior Management Team and to the National NHS England Senior Management Team, who around the various primary care funding flows created a kind of emergency group to try and resolve all of that. So the new departments and the new merged organisations do now have an understanding of the business needs post-merger of primary care and education. The commercial team in the new merged organisation now has that understanding of the various contracts. The team have raised other purchase orders successfully since then that don't relate to spin, new to practice, and are therefore not anticipating a future problem. But obviously we would absolutely have treat it with the utmost urgency if that were to happen. So this is what we believe to have impacted all of you, and I'm very, very sorry, and we have paid that out. So we managed to get the processes cleared nationally at the beginning of September. I believe that the money and the POs went through to the host of the training hub around the second week of September, and then has now transferred out to fellows or practices combined last week. And there is ongoing work with the training hub host to ensure that all finances flow with exceptionally short gaps between going to the training hub host and out to the to the individuals. I'll just take that down. Can I just ask if there are any questions or worries or concerns or anything you want to feed in about that particularly?
I just had a question. So from that, I gather that's that's funding specifically for the PG certificate?
Yeah.
Specifically for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that there's a clear pathway for the payment for that now. So going forward, hopefully those on the PG certificate fellowship, should it continue, they should have almost like a streamlined process.
Yes. The only funding that comes through Workforce Training and Education Directorate or XHGE is the PG Cert. None of the other funding streams, other than say paying the programme directors, so like your SPIN PD, that payment we employ that person. But these PG Cert payments include the bursary and the course and that academic tutor Lindsay McLeod. And obviously, just to mention, we're actually in the middle of a 3-year contract with that provider of PG Cert as well. So we re-procured that about 1.5 years ago. So yes, but basically the normal processes were, I guess, totally derailed in a sense by the legal merger, and that wasn't predicted, but that is resolved.
Okay, and I just wanted to find out as well, because I did the PG certificate last year and there was also a delayed payment then as well, but I gather obviously this has happened in April 2023. So are we saying that hopefully all of those issues have been ironed out, and going forward the new cohort, their process will be streamlined? And is there any other issues for the PG certificate programme that we've identified at this stage that also needs to be addressed, or are we saying that's all been resolved now?
So in previous years, so our team have not flagged serious worries with payments before. So again, quite happy for that to come. I know they deal with individual concerns. This was of a totally different scale. So we're not anticipating those problems. We are in a process with the Training Hub host at the moment, and we're to make sure all finances that are flowed, because actually that's much bigger than just PG Cert and much bigger than fellows. So we are going through another process to make absolutely sure that the time in and out of the host is not in itself a problem. but that's separate to this. And I can't really go into detail so much about that at the moment. So if there is a problem of any kind that we've not identified, please let us know. But those are the only ones that, to my knowledge, we have. But I'm always happy to be updated, and we certainly are looking into all funding flows that are anything to do with workforce training, education out to primary care. Yeah.
I think it's just because I'm just picking up Alex's message in the chat. I'm not sure. I'm sure other people have had a chance to look at that as well. So that might be something that's, something to be aware of going forward. But yeah, so the fellow is saying that it perhaps isn't as straightforward, but maybe that could be looked at another point.
Yeah, I don't think I think on the slides, what it's saying is the first tranche is processed in October, and it's covering September to March, and the second tranche covering April to August is processed in May. But again, the contact for individual things of exact dates, you could certainly contact Sharon Kelly, so that's Sharon.Kelly. And so in terms of individuals, we're not expecting any system problems, and we've not been told there's any specific issues with new tranches of money coming in particularly. Are there any other questions about that side of things? And in terms of, I'm just thinking a little bit more about the question in the chat as well. So that first tranche, which was September to March, I've definitely not been told of a delay, and I see my team every day. But that's not to say there isn't, say, a week's difference, but I've definitely not been told of any system issues. Are there any questions about that side of things? Or would people be happy to feed in more about, are you feeling it's still valuable to have the transition offer with the kind of range that you described? So some one portfolio, some two portfolios, some PG Cert. Are there any major key themes that we appear to have missed? So again, I am talking about the next year, but I'm actually talking about even beyond that as well.
So I'm so sorry to butt in again. I think so. Alex once again is saying that she's also kind of quite complimentary of the fellowship program, that it is an excellent offer, but yeah, it's the funding issue that she's also picked up. I just wanted to clarify. I know we're talking about the PG certificate and sort of like the perks of the fellowship offer, but will we also be addressing, and I think CDAT, it might be more pertinent to you, I think perhaps because Rachel, you've got a meeting to go to, and you said you focus on PG Cert, about the SPIN fellowship funding, if we can get an update on that as well. And I know that there was a meeting with ICB yesterday as well, so if we can have an update on that as well. So I appreciate, Rachel, that might not directly apply to you at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's critical you get that update, because one of the bits of trying to help with this coordinated support has been trying to bring different elements of the system together. So that's why it's really important. And I know a combination of the training hub and Fiona in the ICB will talk, because that other money comes from NHS England National. Jonathan has all of the details of how that comes and when it comes, goes through to an ICB, and then through beyond that to the training hub and the fellows. So that's the only reason I'm not answering that, is because I'm not the expert in those elements, but we do bring that together strategically. So both Jonathan and myself together coordinate that strategically for London. But you do, because I don't have direct responsibility to enact the bits in the ICB or the host in that funding flow, then that's why those people are the best ones to feed back to you just now. We certainly do in our funding flow from workforce training education through Training Hub hosts. And as I said, that's something we're separately meeting around and having a process to make sure there are no glitches at all. But if there isn't any other feedback that you want to give at the moment, I can certainly stop, and then you can hear from those other sections, because obviously I do understand that funding question is really pressing for all of you. What is that? Seem the better approach? Okay, that's fine. Well, thank you for your
Thank
time. I
you.
really appreciate it. And do feel free. I'll stay on till past, which is when I'm expected back at the other meeting. But if there are other bits of feedback you want to give, always feel free. So thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think Jyoti
Yes,
is
thank
here
you.
now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That's really helpful. And that's nicely, Maria and the rest of the team here leads us on to the bit of work that we've done looking at the processes and a bit of review that we've done yesterday with the team. So it's just to update you. I think I'll probably invite Siddharth to update you on where we are in terms of the payments, and then hand over to Fiona to just summarize our discussion yesterday and then open up for questions if that's okay. I will be just looking at the chat functions, so please do add any questions which I'll pose to the team at the end. Thank you. Siddharth, over to you.
Sure. Let me share my screen. So where we are at now, as you know, this year's payments, so for 38 fellows, they are still being paid through ICB. And if we look at the reimbursement payments of these 38 fellows, so 29 of the payments to practices were completed. And ICB has solved the issues in regards to 9 invoices since September, and it has included this 29. And 2 invoices approved for payment last week, so that we know that it's in the pipeline. It will arrive to the practices soon, hopefully. And 1 practice waiting to issue their invoice, and fellow is getting their payments from the practice in the meantime to make sure they are not affected from this delay. And 6 invoices, they are stuck in the SPS system. We had a meeting with ICB finance leads, and they are reviewing each case to determine the appropriate corrective actions for each, because each of the cases are different and the reasons of the delay is different. They stuck in the ICB system for different reasons, and they are looking into this in detail. As mentioned, yes, the second installment of the PG Cert Fellows bursaries, they are paid last week fully. So if anyone has any issues receiving these payments, please get in touch with me so that I can go back to Waltham Forest FedNet colleagues to release the payment. And reimbursement and the CPD payments of the remaining 20 to 23 fellows. So funding has arrived to Waltham Forest Federation, who is the host organization for NAL Training Cup, and invoicing instructions shared with the practices on 2nd of October. And 26 invoices have been received so far for these reimbursement and CPD payments, and 25 of them were paid. And just 1 is scheduled to be paid in the next payment round, most probably next week. And we are also expecting to receive the rest of the invoices to be processed them for payment forward them to Waltham Forest Federation so that they can process them for payment. So yeah, this is the latest position that we are at.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. Siddharth, just in relation to some of the payments that were stuck from the brief discussion that was part of, would you just want to highlight, I know there was a mismatch with the invoice numbers, the names. Do you want to just highlight the issues, the key issues?
There are different issues, but mostly it is about once the practice sends their invoices to SPS, they are matching this invoice with the PO that they have to be able to make the payment. However, in some cases, they can't match the invoice with the existing PO. And for example, when practice puts another name, for example, not the practice name on top of the invoice, but another, for example, doctor's name at that practice, so they can't match the PO with the invoice and they reject the invoice instantly. Or some other cases, for example, the practice didn't put the PO on the invoice, so this was the cause of the delay. So there are several reasons that SPS reject the invoices, but again, ICB finances are working on this to sort out these issues.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. I'm just going to see there's no questions or comments in the chat function yet. I'm going to bring in Fiona now, but if you just keep that slide there, for now, Siddharth, just in case people have any
Sure, yeah, of course, yeah.
questions and think about it. Is that okay? Fiona,
Would it
would
be
that,
would it be
do you
okay to
want
put
it-
it in the would it be okay to put it in the chat rather
yeah,
than
yeah,
head up?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Just so we can see everybody's faces?
thank you, Fiona. Okay, Fiona, thank you. Did you want to just summarize
Yeah.
our review yesterday?
Before I go into the review, just so people know who I am, my name is Fiona Earn and I'm Deputy Director of Primary Care Development and Transformation. So anybody's worked in that knows the ICB is going through a reorganisation at the moment. So the structure is changing. So I lead on primary care development projects across the system. My background is in primary care for most of my NHS career. So I've been involved in paying GPs, dentists, pharmacists, opticians, the whole range. And if you give me, if you allow me, I can do some of the background to this about why something which could, intuitively you must say, but you guys pay practices all the time. And we do, we pay GP practices every month as part of the global sum payments. And the vast majority of payments to GP practices go through that process. And it's quite an easy way to, I wouldn't say it's an easy way, but essentially it's very, very, very tight. And the primary care contracting team will pull together lists of practices who need to be paid. They avoid the issues around the mismatch between names because they rely on the practice code, and they send that list to a dedicated team of people who pay GP practices. So the norm for paying GP practices has always been through that process. And that's through my career. Now that would have become an exception when CCGs were formed and the payments split. So CCGs were more used to using the system that Rachel described, which is an accounts payable system. And Siddharth has described that as well. And the accounts payable system is nationally mandated for the NHS, which is why we all use it. It's referred to as SBS, but it's the Oracle system is the software that you use. But the processes are nationally mandated. And we get increasingly required to raise purchase orders in order to pay anybody. There was a time when you didn't have to do that, and that got you out of jail quite easily. And the SBS system is a national system. It's a huge ledger, and a lot of the processing is done in Leeds. And it does rely on specific information to be on the invoices that comes through. My experience of using it is they would mostly track you down if your invoices go away, because it would be my name would be on it, my organization would be on it, a description of what the goods would be on it. So even if there was the PO didn't match, it would come to you. Some things would come to you that you would be like, that's really not me. So you have to sort of get them put back into send that back up to the help team, and you do work very closely with the help team. There's also facilities to be able to see what's been paid. So if I wanted to pay A, B, C, and D, I could click on a button and it would show me who I paid. So as a manager, it was a good system to use, very effective to use. And it saves a lot of time because the PO number matches the invoice number, it's paid automatically. But Siddharth has highlighted some of the ways that things can go into that system and get held up. So mismatches between the PO numbers, sometimes being sent to the wrong address, the values not matching. That usually involves somebody having to ask for a credit note or cancel the invoice out of the system. So if you're using the system and you're on board with the system, it's a very effective system to use. When we started to look at I think it was clear even before then in terms of the payments that have been made to practices for some of the fellows, we didn't really have a tight enough control. We had a very dispersed ownership of that process. And some of our colleagues, because they're not part of the ICB, they work for training hubs, other organizations, they're not able to have access to that system. So they're working through other people to ask other teams to do this piece of work for them. So what could have been a very nice, tight, lean process had a dispersed ownership across the board. So there was always having to involve quite a lot of people to resolve any problem. And when invoices started going into this system and not matching up to the account, they weren't getting to a person whose inbox would go, that's what it is. And now I'll speak to the finance manager and say, this is what we need to do. Because sometimes you did need to go, can you cancel this invoice, or can you change it, or can you pay it for me through their other authorization processes? And we didn't really have the ability to do that easily without a lot of people having to contact each other, and we didn't really embed that relationship across the different organizations and the different teams. And that is our error, and something we should learn from, and something we should be absolutely making sure doesn't happen in the future, because whatever we feel about the way the NHS is structured at the moment, we will be working at all levels across teams, so we need to find ways to get around that. We're not envisaging using that system again in the future, and certainly I would look to see if we could make any, if we were asked to do the payments as the ICB, I would put them on the global sum payment. If I could, that's really very easy way to do it. But as I said, there is some guidance coming around that we shouldn't do that except for training grants. So I'm sort of thinking maybe there is a way to do this that would be very, very slimline. So at the moment, the and recognizes this was a very clunky, hard to manage, resource heavy way to do something. We did switch to asking the training hub to not just host the management of the schemes, but the payments. So we brought that together in one place, rather than have it split across more than one organization, to be honest. And that's what we've done this year, but we hit quite a long delay in transferring the money because of the high value of the contract, and it was escalating up to a very high level for authorization. It took a long time for us to handhold that through and get that signed off. So we're prepared for that this year to get that sign off for the payment. In the meantime, we have most of the resources for this year already sitting with the FedNet to be paid out to people. So I hope that explains. In the meantime, we are going to look at options about making sure that we have a tighter process, no matter where it sits, and we get out those payments, including looking at whether we can run this through the global sum payment, because that's incredibly fast, very error-free. The only difficulty you have is the reconciliation with the practices. But certainly when I've done this, and I've done this over about 30 years, you write to the practices and say, you will get paid this month. And you're literally handing a list to your colleagues sitting next to you to put it through, and they'll tell you that it's going through. And we don't get that confusion about the, slight differences in the GP names, because we're using the practice code, which might be a default that we do implement for some of the invoices as well, because you can always track a practice code.
Thank you, Fiona. I mean, that's probably a good summary of what we discussed yesterday in terms of the gaps and moving forward.
And again, can I just apologise to everybody who's been affected by it, because it's not a nice, it's a terrible thing to have happened. And we absolutely need to, one of the things we agreed yesterday was that the purpose of this was, to make sure people are paid. It's not about a lot, the processes are there to facilitate that, not to get in the way. And it was our job to make sure that happened. And it is something that has a very high profile, and it has our senior finance leads working on it at the moment to pull those invoices, that wherever they're stuck and do that in the most expedient way.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm just looking at some of the questions coming in the chat function. You probably referred to it, Jenny, but I'm just going to pose it again. What's the plans for payments going forward in terms of how frequently they're going to get paid?
I think we are generally going to default to quarterly payments to the practice. The way the budget is flowing, it wouldn't make that we would create a cash flow problem one way or the other if we did annual payments up front. That was possible previously, but whatever way we would do it, it would hit a cash flow problem. So it's probably quarterly payments, but as long as they're regular, that doesn't matter. There's some question about whether a monthly payment to the practice is less fraught with error because you just do it monthly and it gets it in the system. The worst thing you can do is overpay. So the quarterly payments, you know, if there's anything that the more regularly you do something, usually the better you are at doing it. But with the quarterly payments is where we would be looking at going into the future, because I don't think it would be possible to have the cash to do a year up front, given because we're in a different cycle from the academic year.
Yep, no, that's fine, Fiona. And this is probably Siddharth and Fiona, maybe you want to come in here as well. And Maria, absolutely, totally unacceptable. And again, my apologies as well on behalf of the system for the fellows that who've really probably had mortgages to pay and, you know, kids and etc. to feed. But I think it's a really fair point that Maria you raises in terms of your main point and what's going to be done differently in terms of communication. Because your point is that you weren't told this was happening, and how moving forward we would keep you know, the fellows updated if there is, hopefully there won't be any further hiccups. Siddharth, I don't know whether you want to come into that and respond to that query.
Yeah, I think this was something that we also discussed yesterday in terms of, you know, because we were the main contact in terms of for the fellows, basically. However, we were staying in the middle between the fellows and the ICB colleagues in regards to the payments and the information. So that is why we discussed with our ICB colleagues to understand, you know, in the future, maybe we should have one point of contact from ICB to sort this out and, you know, to inform on these issues, etc., so that we can, once we get the information from them directly, we can inform you accordingly, basically. Yeah, this is something that needs to be improved, definitely. And we already discussed this. And in terms of the second question on the chat box, Maria, we did send the invoicing instructions and templates this time to all the practices for the new payments, to avoid the, you know, the issues on the some of the invoices from practices, i.e., you know, the not putting the PO number on it, or putting on the or not putting the invoice number, for example, or putting the address wrong. And secondly, the invoices will come to us directly rather than going to SBS. This is for the remaining of the 22-23 fellows, and we have been checking these invoices to make sure they are correct. And once we are sure that they are correct, we then forward them to relevant colleagues for payment, basically.
Thank you, Siddharth. And I suppose one of Maria's point as well is who's going to be the main point of contact for payment queries. Are we saying is you still coming to you, Siddharth?
Well, I think, yeah, for the program management office should stay. What do you think, Fiona?
Yeah, I mean, possibly if we have a generic as well, that we can have more than one person man it. One of the other things that I have to feedback is we relied quite a lot on quite a few individuals who were on long-term sick leave, and actually that was a flaw as well, because you could, you weren't getting the follow-up because they were in a, it wasn't just long-term sick, there's periods of long-term sick. So, and they were sort of quite critical to the process moving through. And when they weren't there, it was kind of quite hard for other people to unblock. And even if you escalated to their line managers were quite, you know, what's this now? Because it's within primary care for GP contract payments, it's so unusual to do it this way. Most of my colleagues wouldn't have experience of using the PO system because all the payments go as part of the global sum, and that's such an easier way to do it. You know, it really is. It's sort of like you wouldn't believe the difference. But not really using that accounts payable system, which does work, but it needs you as a manager, or when I've used it as a manager, you have to be quite on top of it. And it doesn't really let you off the hook unless something really gets lost. But there are teams of people who would, you know, aligning, and I don't know why. So some of the managers who these invoices should have potentially escalated to are saying they haven't seen anything. Because you usually, if something lands, you hold it until you've figured out where to send it to, and only very rarely do you send it back to the main. It's sort of, you know, it's a bit of poor form to just keep passing it from pillar to post, that you try and find somebody who can hold it for you.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. Great. Fiona, there's an interesting comment here in the chat function, which I'm just kind of reflecting on from Ulva. It's about, you know, that we advertise that the fellows are going to be paid quarterly so they can go in knowing and plan financially. Obviously the whole thing is about recruiting GPs, and we don't want to put people off. So what's your view?
That's the payment to the practice. I probably wouldn't help anybody to be paid quarterly, would it? I don't know. Is that a good thing? I think the practices would probably pay you monthly. I'm assuming that. Is that an issue? I'd assume that nobody would want to be paid a year in advance, because you wouldn't want it to recover it either. It's generally speaking, most of us are paid monthly in arrears. This is the payment to the practice, which would be quarterly in advance, so it would maintain their cash flow. So even if we delayed a payment, they would still have a capacity to pay you monthly in arrears as a standard.
And I
Does
think
that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Sanjeev's helpfully said that if they could have the dates, if possible, of the quarterly payments, so in case they haven't received, then maybe they can chase from their end as well. That's sort of a good suggestion as well. So Benjamin's also wondering about the second year of, if the second year of SPIN is guaranteed. So Dan, I don't know whether you want to come in on that one. The self-organized SPIN fellows in the second year, is the second year of funding guaranteed? It is, but go on.
This program is, you know, there's no acceptance as such, you know. It is, you know, open to all GPs. If they would like to continue to their second year, then definitely.
It's a ring-fenced allocation. It's actually at the moment we've got a ceiling drawdown, but I think Jonathan can possibly weigh in on this. If we went from 90 fellows to 150, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But if we exceeded our fellowship, we can then go and look, or we're potentially doing it, we could look to drawing down more. So it's a kind of quite a holy grail of NHS budgets, and nobody can use it for anything else.
Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, the genesis of the SPIN, well, the genesis of the national fellowship offering goes back to the long-term plan, which was probably now 3 or 4 years ago. And in that plan, the national team committed to every newly qualified GP being offered 2 years fellowship. So, you know, that is still the offer on the table. If we can try and break the bank, you know, I mean, we will, you know, if you do have more fellows than they've allocated nationally, we'll just report, you know, we'll just point them back to the long-term plan and say that is your commitment. These are GPs who meet the criteria. The other thing to say, just going forward, there is certainly for the foreseeable future there is a commitment to fellowships from the national team and in national funding, and certainly we know as part of this year's GP contract negotiations and for 24-25, those fellowships are in the bank, if you like. They are. We know next year there will be an election. There may be, and certainly during next financial year there will be negotiations about a new 5-year GP contract from 25-26. But let's not look too far into the crystal ball. Certainly anyone who starts a fellowship this year or next year, the national team will put aside 2 years of funding for that individual. So that is just to guarantee that.
Thank you, Jonathan. That I hope that's reassured you, Benjamin. Siddharth and Fiona, there's a question about the payment to the practices and MOUs that you have. What the fellows are saying is that the practices won't pay out until, you know, they've guaranteed the money coming through. So can you just say a bit more about the MOUs, and does that allow for the monies to be paid to the fellows in a timely fashion, even if you paid that quarterly payment?
So there would be a requirement, whatever process you'd run, there'd be a requirement for the agreement to be signed, but we should be doing that well in advance of the payment flow. And we need to make sure that we take out any redundancies in that process to get it signed. So once it's signed, that can generate all of the payments and look to moving towards a quarterly in advance payment. So in order for people to be paid monthly in arrears. So we should have that month grace. We just need to look to see whether how much. I think, Siddharth, you were saying yesterday the area where we have delays in MOU agreements is with the placement organisation, the third parties. And I can see why that would be an issue, and I'm wondering whether we need to have it as an issue. In relation to the MOU to pay, yeah. I'm not convinced. There's probably a finance person falling over at me saying that, but it occurred to me when we said it. We need their commitment to something, but it's not the payment. It's not the relationship between the program and the practice. It's a commitment to another thing. So I'm sort of saying if we can separate that will cut out a huge amount of time and delay and take us to a neater place.
Siddharth, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, the specialist opportunity providers, they are included in the MOUs because, you know, they have also financial arrangement between the fellow and that provider. For example, if QMUL is involved in this process, then they are paying for the second session, and they are doing it through this MOU, because rather than creating several different MOUs, we put them on one MOU to be able to make this, you know, easier. But yeah, we saw that sometimes it's stuck in their system, and we waited for 1 month, 1.5 months for specialist provider to get back to us in terms of the signature. And as now we are in transition to a new area in terms of, you know, making quarterly payments to practices, etc. This is something that we definitely look into, and we will tweak our MOUs accordingly. Maybe put a, I don't know, we need to look into this to make sure that the practices continue paying the fellows regardless of the date that they receive their payments. And then also maybe we should separate the MOU between the specialist provider to make sure we are not being delayed because of the delay on their signature process.
So Siddharth, did you want to take that away as an action and perhaps just update the
sure, of
fellows
course,
at the next meeting on that contract and the couple of points there? Thank you. Murray, I'm just going to bring you in here. I mean, you mentioned that you still feel there should be some name contacts, and Siddharth, we said, would be your name contact as the organizer, so to speak. And were you hoping for other sort of contacts, or what were you hoping for, some other contacts in the ICB, or?
Yes, because
Go
for the
on.
payment, should there be a payment query going forward? Like, we are making improvements, and I appreciate the fact that we're all trying, to get together to make changes, but inevitably this is a new system. There will be glitches on the way. I appreciate Siddharth's there helping us as well, but we do need another person or a named contact taking responsibility for that payment side, whether it be from the ICB, whether it be from FedNet, or wherever this payment is coming from. I feel like that needs to be transparent. I'm happy, I feel, and perhaps others may agree with me, that the inbox can be shared so that people have access, but quite frankly, behind the scenes of that inbox, that's not really got to do much with us. I think our concern more is about making sure that we've got someone taking responsibility, that should we have a problem with the payment, we're not just kind of bombarding Siddharth or Sarah. We actually have got direct contact with the person who's responsible for approving payments involved.
It's just the escalation pathways, what you're looking for, really.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, Jonathan, I don't know when you want to come in and
Well,
bring Field.
Well, I was going to say, just it's not, you could have as many people, who might be contacted, but I think essentially, as you say, what Maria's talking about is, should the normal contact with people like Siddharth not achieve any action or movement, then we do need that escalation. Ultimately, the ICB are responsible. We had a very good meeting with Sarah C, who's the primary care director, I would want to say,
managing director.
Okay, so we had and I know Sarah herself is very takes this whole thing very seriously and wants to see it resolved. So I think let's just also think about that escalation. Obviously we don't go straight to escalation, but I think we do also need to ensure that that does kick in fairly quickly if it's clear that there are any issues with the new process.
And yeah, I mean, we can work that out. The problem with named people is they go on sick leave, out of the office, so it's quite frustrating. So a generic is a good way to do it. I'm happy for to look at whether it's me. The problem is, I have a huge portfolio, so that means that it has to get my attention. One of the areas where we could do this is put the fellowship and payment of fellows as a standing item on some of our committee meetings. So, and that means so that we get it. So there is a specific highlight report to say, this is where we are, there are no problems, etc. That would be a way to do it. And so at the moment we have more than one opportunity to do that. So I manage a group which deals with all the workforce issues, so it can go on that as a highlighted item, and we can, and that will then have all the directors of primary care who will be able to pick up on that and agree who should be taking forward the action, and we can put it on the training hub oversight board as well, can't we, Jyoti, so that it's picked up through there. So those are the things that we can do immediately, and then I can identify somebody who can deal with the queries coming into my team and escalate them. But hopefully I'll just be doing one payment, which is hard just because of the size of it, and that's kind of a different level. But obviously, if there's issues with the PMO, that would be the way. And we can also look at our fellowship working group about whether it'd be useful to have some membership and representation from here, because I would be really anxious. So I would love to hear. So I see something good in this chat about differences across areas of NEL. I would not want that to be the case. So I don't know why that is, but I would certainly want to know that we are resourcing all of our fellows in the same way to the extent that we can. But I would have one exception, and that is we've got parts of NEL where we have to attract more doctors rather than others. So that may well be a case where we're offering better packages, not necessarily financial, but that's where we'd want to hear from fellows yourselves. What kind of utility would attract you to work in some of those other areas? What kind of opportunity would you want, and how would we be able to support you? And what might be the barriers to you wanting to work in those areas, and how could we alleviate them? Because the fellowship program is at the heart of our GP recruitment and retention. And also how you step off your fellowship and how we support you stepping off your fellowship into the next step of your career.
And as part of the sort of other discussions, wider discussion we're having about the strategy we have across NEL, recruiting and retaining, and how it's linked to the places. But yeah, really good points actually, Fiona. Maria, did you want to? Sorry, I just and the other person who we can loop in is we will be setting up a working group which centres around this, which brings everybody together, and that will be chaired by Ben Molyneux, who's an ex-fellow himself, and we can put it on as an item with that. Thanks, Fiona. Maria, did you want to come back on a couple of sort of points about the feedback?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if, because you've said that obviously it can be a standing item, you know, ensuring this funding problem, you know, isn't repeated in the future, or if there is problems, it can be addressed quickly. And there's also going to be a working group, hopefully, but if that could be shared somewhere. So, because I know that obviously there's new fellows who are yet even to be onboarded onto the peer fellowship meeting links as well. So if that could be shared, then they can hopefully you know, take it forward, because I don't want it to be another repeat of this, that everyone becoming aware of the issue so late just because there hasn't been communications on both sides. And that's one way of not having a problem, not getting feedback, isn't it? And I feel that's been one of the biggest problems this year, that no one's really kind of piped up, and we've not been able to kind of feedback as a group, and that's why the issue has been kind of dealt with in such a kind of a group manner and so late. So I would like to prevent that in the future, and if the working groups or the you know, the fact that there is a standing item there, if that could be flagged and highlighted to all the fellows, and how they can access and get onto that would be helpful. Is it through CDAT? Is it through someone else? That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I mean, I'd love to have fellowship input into those types of groups, because you know, or for us to come, you know, I'm happy to come here. It's your peer group, you don't have to, you know, I'm sure this is the last thing you want to be talking about, not because it's not important, but there's, you know, but I'm happy to come here and get some input into steering how we're delivering those programs, and in particular that kind of what, as you come to the end of your fellowships, how are we supporting you into the next part of your career, what you're interested in, et cetera, and you know what doesn't work in the national offer. We know there's Jonathan knows I go on about this all the time, but we know we have to offer more to attract people into such a challenging environment. So what would that look like in now, and then what would that next stage be, and beyond that? And it's better for me to hear from you guys than reading Reddit chat forums to find out, which are very illuminating actually, but you know, if anybody hasn't read them, I find it interesting.
No, that's fine, Fiona. I was also wondering maybe just having a system induction for the new fellows as well. I think that would be really great, just so they know the people and how the ICB and who, what, how kind of the ICB. So you might want to just take that to that as an action for induction as well.
And if you wanted to design your induction or be part of that, would be good as well. And I will say another thing. We've been doing a lot of promoting of fellows, and you wouldn't believe the number of meetings I go to with service leads and stuff, and they're so interested in this role and onboarding you and getting people involved in what they do. So, and the work that you do, I don't think it gets, but you know, a lot of the work that you do you know, when I feed it back to people, they're going, "Oh, that's great, that's brilliant." And it you know, it really is now becoming a thing within the organization, where we would like you to be far more engaged in some of our wider programs as well, where you can promote what you're doing. And that can help link you into some of the leadership opportunities as well.
Yeah, we've got to start thinking about the post-fellowship support and offer. And it's one of the things that I think Rachel's quite keen on as well, which is up for discussion, I think, at the next primary care school board. So yeah, we can probably take that forward. So Doctor, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just wanted to say, you know, each local training cup also has responsibility in terms of, you know, fellows induction to the their system in the local areas. So, and I know that in each area there are different induction programs in place, but maybe we should have a you know, so please go back to your local training cup leads as well to understand what is the induction process in your area. But definitely I will take it back to the local training cup leads to maybe make a joint induction program for newly qualified fellows specifically to make it a better process.
And I think it'll be helpful, as I think Fiona said, to co-design that induction with the current fellows to see what that looks like. That's brilliant. There was a question about the rationale on the CPD funding. Amy, I don't think neither of us can answer that. I think probably Jonathan could have, and I can certainly take that away and ask the question to the national team. It's not something that we decide locally, unless Siddharth, you know the answer.
Yeah, this is something that we locally decided, because, you know, NAL reviewed the variation. NAL reviewed the variation of staffing rates per 100k per across East London, and some of the boroughs are, you know, there were some variation between the boroughs, and some of the boroughs of hyper-local boroughs, you know, BHR, Needham, and Waltham Forest. Hence, we agreed with the ICS colleagues, with Fiona and everyone, that, you know, we will pay them 2k for their CPDs rather than £1,000 only for these areas, to, you know, make these areas more attractive, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. So over Munair's replacement interviews are happening tomorrow. Sorry, Fiona, did you want to come back on that point, or?
Yeah, if I just explain to people the rationale, because that's the kind of why we got there. The rates of GPs per 100,000 in now vary a lot. So the rate of GPs in City and Hackney is 50 GPs, full-time equivalents, not headcount, per 100,000. In Barking and Dagenham, it's 36. And that's an average, and you will get an outlier around that range as well. So some of them higher, some of them lower. So there's a huge disparity that goes right to the heart of potentially really strong inequalities. And there is a high workload associated with all of NEL communities, so Tower Hamlets, City and Hackney, etc. But quite often some of those interactions have low rates of, and we're quite lucky that Tower Hamlets and City and Hackney have those high rates, but some of our other areas that there is a huge high workload, and it's kind of like a unvirtuous cycle of in terms of recruitment and retention that we sort of have to address.
So we're just trying to attract people to the under-doctored areas, essentially. Yeah, that's really helpful background, Fiona. Thank you. So Glory said, this is something about not having a peer link being sent. So I don't know whether you can take that as an sort of action for Sarah. So Glory says she hasn't had a peer weekly link either.
Okay, I will look into this and to make sure. No, I don't know what was the issue there. Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, I just wanted to, it was just to say, yeah, I've signed on and I've started my scheme, but actually I haven't really been told, are there any next steps? You know, what do I need to do apart from working.
Okay. I will also get in touch with the local training club lead in your area to make sure, you know, they take the necessary steps to make your induction, basically. Yeah, sure. I will take that as an action.
And actually, all of them
Thank you.
should be linked with the national mentoring scheme as well, Siddharth. So I just want to make
Yes.
sure that
Again,
that's happening.
Sure. Again, this is, you know, mentoring scheme is also managed by each locality area and with their training club leads. But for example, I can only speak on behalf of NIFM because I know NIFM, we have a coaching, mentoring and leadership hub. We have some leads there and they are working with each fellow individually to be able to, you know, enroll them to the mentorship program. But yeah, I'm taking this an action for, and I will, you know, transfer them to the local training club leads. Sure.
With the permission of the peer group, could we take over some of the time here to do an induction with all of the local training hub leads, some of the key primary care people like Ben?
Yes, that's
Absolutely.
a
Would that
good
be
idea.
something?
Yeah,
And we do
sure.
that annually? Is that something that would work for the group? And we can do a bit of a presentation on what primary care looks like in now.
Yeah.
Fiona, I think if you just let I think CDAT, if you can work with CDAT and just let the group know beforehand, because
Yeah.
then they'll realise how important that meeting is. And the GP surgeries, as I was relaying to earlier, sometimes they don't always allow release of fellows. But obviously, if we're saying it's an induction, it's part of the fellowship, there's more kind of reason to kind of release the fellows or offer a shift swap or something else. But it would be really important and helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to do them. We were having this last night. I was with pharmacies into the late evening, and then they always do evening things. And I said, GPs like lunchtime. It's it. And dentists like eminent. They like specialists. They like consultants to be there. There's a whole thing of that you have to learn about. So yeah, I mean, we can try to do that, and we can try to highlight the needs. I mean, I always, you know, with some of the colleagues about the need to release people for activities like this, including peer support. But it is part of that unvirtuous cycle we're in at the moment. The workloads are crippling everybody. So the things we need to do to invest in our future kind of go, you know, that kind of, it just is one of those things. And, you know, we will keep pushing the good message out there that this is important.
Okay, brilliant. Steph, there's another question about the pay uplift. I'm sure there was some emails floating around in relation to this from Rachel. Are you cited on that at all?
Well, while developing each MOU, we are asking for the annual salary reimbursement for that fellow. And what, you know, the amount at the time, what is the amount we reflected on the MOU? So it may be changed from last year. So we reflected on the MOU, but, you know, it needs to be while, you know, the MOU is developing, we only look at the rate at that time and the snapshot of that rate. And then we took it on the same, we use the same rate on the MOU. So your question, yes. If there's an uplift in your salary, then it will be reflected on your fellowship MOU as well.
Is that okay, Sanjeev? Did you want to come back on that one? Are you saying halfway through if the salary is changed?
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure then, because then will there be a mismatch in the PO invoices or the actual values? Will that cause an administrative issue? Or
it shouldn't in the current payment model, no. So the model we've now got in place, those POs, it's because we're paying through the federation rather than, like I said, the nationally mandated system is lovely system. When it works well, it works well. But so yeah, we're avoiding that. You know, it's because yeah, which is why I said if we were just paying through the global sum, it would be here's an adjustment with back pay for this month. If you see what I mean, it's So yeah.
Okay, so just because obviously most of us won't be involved with actually the invoicing part. So if I basically ask my practice manager, this is going to be the new salary, this is what needs to be put on the invoice, there shouldn't really be any discrepancies, and then we should be getting quarterly payments.
I mean, if the variation to the MOU can be notified on email, this is the change, and then that can be attached as a variation, which can generate the paperwork to do that. So it's.
So before going into the invoicing process, you just need to let us know so that we can make the necessary arrangements on your contracts, etc., on the MOUs, and then the practice can invoice with the new amount, basically.
So then I can email you.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Thank you.
I can't see any other questions, but I'm just going to wait to see people that haven't asked. Okay. Maria, whilst we let people think, you go and ask a question.
You spoke too soon, Jyoti. I just had a question about the feedback forms, and I think we were hoping to catch Sarah as well, because I think she circulated them mid-year to get feedback on the fellowship. One of the fellows was just asking, how is that feedback used and the impact of it? How will it be shared with the fellows, so that actually they've got some feedback that feedback is being taken on board or something's being done about it?
Do you want to come in on that one?
So there are several different reporting mechanisms in terms of the fellowship program. We report back to NHSC, we report back to ICS, and through several different reporting spreadsheets and links and etc. So what we have been doing is we are getting these feedbacks from fellows to make sure we are reporting them back to NHSC or ICS or all the organizations that are responsible for this program. And we also use them for example, if there's a positive feedback, then we use it for the communication in the future cohorts as the for the good and recommendations for the program. But if there's any negative comment, then we definitely let the NHSC know, ICS know about this, because they are being asked to us in terms of what was the risk, what was the negative comments, etc., etc. So definitely they are being used in our reports.
But is it making some changes sort of more locally, and do the fellows get feedback themselves on what they fed back, so that actually they feel that they've been listened to and that this feedback was worthwhile? Because otherwise it just feels a bit futile doing this.
We should do you said we did report is essentially. So and sometimes with you said we did, you have to do, we couldn't do anything about this, but at least you've been, that's feedback, isn't it, that this is beyond our scope.
I think that's a really important point, because how do we know what we're doing is right or not?
And then we can baseline that for future years as well.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm wondering, Siddharth, we have the fellowship meeting, I don't know if it's monthly or 6 weekly. If the route could be that, where Sarah, Sule, yourself, me, I think Fiona also attends that, and that could then feed into the enablement group and also the oversight group. So we just have an accountability and a governance structure in relation to that, whilst Fiona sort of arranges what happens with ICB, further discussion with Ben chairing some meetings, etc. Would that be okay?
Yeah,
we can have the updates in terms of the numbers and the feedback, and I'd be really interested in looking at that feedback actually.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Again, Siddharth, I'm slightly disappointed that the fellows don't know about the mentorship, because there's a comment here from Urva about how they access the mentoring component. I know it's down to the locality training hubs to have a chat, and but I'm just wondering if we can have each of the localities come and present here about the membership offer and how they access it. I think it's really important. It was designed for fellows, and actually data is showing that everybody else but the fellows are accessing it. So I'm really keen.
Jyoti, we have been asked to improve that, and I
Yeah.
think the enablement group has got the plan for improvement. Probably in December, that I think we might be mismatched by a month or so on the timetable at the moment, because we effectively skipped a month. But yeah, we are looking at that and your input on that, and I think that should be something regularly presented as part of the induction. This is the mentorship and how you can access. And again, if there's problems with that not being as effective as it should be, we should know that.
No, exactly. Absolutely. Siddharth, would you mind feeding that back to Nell PMO for me
Yeah,
as well?
I will definitely.
And I will just take that action as well. But would you mind just letting us know what the next available data, so we can bring the localities to talk about the.
Yeah.
When we come in the meantime, I can just offer if people contact me directly, they're keen on some mentoring, and I can try and link up until we sort out the presentations, etc. So if you want to contact me directly, I can link you with your locality team to set that up for you, and for anyone else really. I think it's such a fantastic scheme. I think I myself had mentoring about a couple of years ago, and that was the best thing I could have had. Really, it was brilliant. So please do take up on that offer. There was a question about Maneir's role, so I think we're interviewing tomorrow. So hopefully, I've seen a couple of applicants. I think they will be absolutely brilliant, really, for this group. So hoping we'll get somebody who would be as good as Maneir, if not better. Amy's talking something. I don't know if it's in relation to the. Amy, do you want to just conscious that some of the questions are drying up now? Amy, did you want to just come and just stop typing?
Oh, so I was just going to ask if you could put your email in the chat, but I think I've actually found it. I was looking on the invite list, but yeah, it might be useful. Thank you.
That is a good point, Amy. Thank you. Just assumed everybody would know me. Sorry. Yes, that's great. Thank you. Okay.
And just one other thing before we close, if there's anything you want to highlight of the work that you've done and good practice and stuff, you let us know, so we can make sure that that's recognized across the system. That we're always looking for. Jonathan's always looking for stuff like that. He's always asking me to look for stuff like that, but it's useful because I'm often mentioned, we've got a fellow who does that, and people are like, oh, brilliant, and run off. And I know in some other levels that I've represented the work done by clinical leads and fellows in around inclusion groups and stuff and other areas, and thought that's brilliant. So you might think what you do is normal, but
yeah. And Fiona, maybe we should have a Fellow of the Year award for next year as well. The awards.
We have a Fellow of the Year.
But do you guys know we have a Fellow of the Year? No.
I'm sure we have. We did last year, because I remember who won it.
Siddharth, do you want to circulate that? Because I didn't see it in there, Fiona. When I went to email you to say I didn't see a Fellow of the Year.
There was a lot of fellows. There was a lot of fellows were there, but I thought Ben won it last year. That was before he was it wasn't a stitch up. That was before he was appointed. But I remember Ben getting something, and I thought it was for a fellowship. That's why I knew he was a fellow.
Yeah. I didn't see it this year, but it'll be, if start, just you want to check it, and I think share it with the fellows. It'd be helpful for them to nominate if the time hasn't quite passed. It'd be, be nice to be recognized.
Of course, yeah.
Really, yeah, that level. That'd be brilliant. Okay, so I can see people are just drifting off now. Already hardly any handful of people left, but Fiona and Siddharth, thank you ever so much for all the work you've put into the review and coming up here, and I suppose giving assurance to the fellows to an extent, and clarifying the pathways and the contacts moving forward. I hope for the fellows, massive apologies again, but I hope the process and the discussion today has assured you, and you've at least got the name contact should things go topsy-turvy again. And we absolutely want Nell to be the best place that you all work in, and actually through feedback, like this and the others, that we would know if you're doing a good job or not. So please do carry on feeding that back in any shape or form. You can see the rain's just falling now. But thank you so much. And thank you, Maria, for being an excellent leader for this group and voicing the concerns. And I suppose to Manera as well for supporting you in voicing your concerns.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.